Welcome everyone to our conference proper this morning, although we have already had a couple of sessions, dinner last night with the Minister and our breakfast session this morning, where we were explained the intricacies of competition law, and the critical issue being that it's not whether you kill someone or not, it's whether you're intended to kill them or not. Our first conference session this morning provides an opportunity to reflect on the experiences of some sectors of agriculture under Australia's carbon policies. As I'm sure most of you would be aware, Australian carbon policies came into effect on July the 1st this year, and a number of participants in agricultural supply chains have been directly engaged by that policy or are starting to look at the opportunities that it might present. Our three speakers in this morning's session all have had direct engagement with Australia's fledgling carbon market and will provide us with an up-to-date perspective on what the policies have meant or might mean for their businesses. Our first speaker is David Foote, the CEO of Australian Country Choice. David has been in leadership roles across the agribusiness, meat processing and exporting sector for the last 30 years, including roles at McBride Pastoral, the Meyer Families, Laradoc Pastoral, AMP, Stanbroke Pastoral and Kilcoy Holdings across all the mainland states. He's been in his current role as Chief Executive Officer at the Australian Country Choice Group of companies since 2002. Headquartered in Brisbane and employing over 1,000 staff, Australian Country Choice operates a significant vertically integrated supply chain encompassing cattle breeding, growing and feedlotting to supply its integrated processing facility in Brisbane, incorporating beef slaughtering, boning, value-adding and retail-ready packaging. David represents beef industry interests in his role as a Director to the Australian Meat Processors Corporation Board, a Councillor of the Australian Meat Industry Council National Export Beef Processor Council and Chairman Meat and Livestock Australia's South Asia China Marketing Task Force. In 2010, David was awarded Rural Press's Beef Achiever of the Year in recognition of his contribution to the industry. In 2011, he was appointed a member of the Trustees Board for the Queensland Trust for Nature and has published a scientific publication entitled Conservation Outside Nature Reserves. David's success can probably be attributed to a period of his career when he was a resident of Mullinjandra, a very small village on the Hume Highway in southern New South Wales. Many good people in agriculture have come from that particular village. And I know David's going to cast his discussion more broadly than carbon, but I think he'll give us a good start-off point to this discussion today. So please welcome David Foote.
Thanks very much, Mick. And he was a crap neighbour at Mullinjandra. It was always his side of the fence that fell down. It's always his fly-blown ram that got through the fence, and it was always his mongrel dog that chased my chooks. But fortunately, both of us found our way north out of the depths of modernisation of Mullinjandra, which was recognised, I think, by its pub more than its only school and donga for a post office. But it's nice to reflect back. Thank you very much, Mick. Part of obviously being a speaker here today is to try and deliver you value for money, and that you had to buy a ticket. And I was a next door neighbour to Mick, so at the end of this, I suspect, hopefully, if you haven't been more or better informed, then maybe you've been slightly entertained, and the serious act of John Berry and Ben Keogh can follow me. So if we can work out how to start this, let's do it.
Girls want more wine.
Over there.
So, what are we having, Chef?
Lentil and feta salad and roasted squash.
Smashing. And main course?
That is the main course.
Right. Well, it's just, I don't eat vegetarian.
What do you mean?
I'm a meat eater.
But, Mark, you know Wendy and I are veggie.
Yes, I know. And when you two came round for dinner, we made you a mushroom risotto. I was sort of expecting you to return the effort. Want some meat, please?
Sorry, I didn't know you felt so strongly about it.
It's an ethical thing. I don't think humans should be treated like this.
Right, what can I say? We don't really do meat in this house.
Oh, come on, you must have some meat somewhere around here. What was that I saw wandering round earlier?
The cat?
That'll do. I'll have that with some rice.
No, that's the cat.
Look quite lean and gamey.
But it's ours. It's a pet.
You mean you keep an animal in captivity for no reason? That's barbaric. At least pigs are for sausages.
Ah, no, you see, they're not. They're actually highly intelligent creatures.
Oh, yeah, right, they're doing secretarial work on the farm. Come on, they're sausage fodder. Why else would anyone keep pigs?
Well, because...
Pig cheese, pig wool.
Well,
pigs are expensive, pink and annoying, but they're also delicious, which is why we breed so many of them. There might be a few polar bears left if more people wanted one for breakfast.
What?
Where are the pigs, Daddy? In the zoo. More mushroom risotto, anyone? Oh, not so caring now. Face it, you want to hound a species to extinction. Me, I just want to eat some meat.
Shit.
Exactly.
All right, then. Yeah, puss. Is that...
Okay. That set the scene for all of us who aren't Muslim by faith. So, just over the next 15 minutes or so, a little bit about me, a little bit about my company, a glimpse of some of our challenges and just picking up some headline areas being global, national industry, and then I guess maybe trying to put some David Foote style solutions to it, because it's not really somebody else's problem. We've got to start to deal with our own issues and focus on what we can control. Now, while I tell you a little bit about me, I think you should read my disclaimer, because it seems to be the thing that you need to understand these days, such that I can walk out of here. Mick was kind enough to outline my career, which started with the Department of Agriculture in South Australia and has progressed across sheep farming, beef feedlotting, beef retailing, to a point where I was invited to come to Queensland 16 years ago to join with Stanbroke to transition it from a cattle company into a beef company, which incorporated the development of a feedlot, the development of live export and the development of a branded beef program. So, disclaimer's read. ACC, the company, it doesn't have a big brand, it doesn't have a big position, it does a job. But as part of being that job, we have our finger in a lot of the pies, or our footprint across a lot of the pies in industry. We're a private family company, one share, one chairman. We have a board. I have a board meeting each lunch hour, and a new priority by the end of it. So the beauty of having a private company is that if you haven't got yesterday's priority done, well, we may have forgotten about it between us and passed the leftovers. So, but it just part of it means you can actually be, I suppose, a little bit more proactive being private and make some decisions and just get the job done when you have a board of one. So I'm involved in beef processing here in Brisbane. Our only processing site is 8k from this hotel, and that allows us, where we process the numbers there, 270,000 yearling cattle. We have over 19 value-added products within our range, which are for national distribution. We have a few cattle. We have a cattle herd that's based on owned, managed and leased landholds, effectively into the background in growing phase prior to entering into our feedlot operations. We have 850 people in the city and 150 people in the bush. Our sole focus principle in life is supplying 743 Coles supermarkets on a national basis, but principally the eastern seaboard, where we are 72% of the fresh beef supply chain. So, what's coming this next? What do we look at in the future as we look over the horizon or look behind the curtain? The challenges, and I put the northern beef sector here because it's 16 years since I was down the south, so I don't think I'm in a comfortable position to comment, although some who know me will say that's never stopped me before. But what I want to touch on are the things, I guess, that keep me energised each day and trying to vision and plan where our business is going to go forward. So under the global network, we've got to talk about free trade networks, because the primary production sector is totally reliant on the converting sector which is us as meat processors and beef, and we have to have unfettered access to gain the optimal maximum values for that product. So in the unlikely event that we wish to pass it down to the chain, the primary production end will benefit as well. Under the national system, we obviously got the big thing biting us at the moment, and looking at us is a carbon tax. There are the whole raft of issues there or challenges. Now from an industry point of view, because I know a little bit about it, that's why you're going to get bombarded with at least the 5 subtopics that are involved in the industry. I do have to go back to the fact that I put carbon at the start on the first slide was allowed me to at least answer or tick the box that Mick wanted to talk about carbon. So let's go back to free trade agreements. I mean, it's a really interesting thing, free trade. I mean, everybody wants a level playing field, and it sounds great. But if a playing field's so level, why do we change ends at half time? Pose. Think about the activity of free trade agreements. These are the ones we have in place over the last 20 odd years. And the things in red are the tariff regimes that apply, particularly to our product, in the beef product. I haven't covered any other sectors, subject matter expert beef only, not sugar, who I know represented here today well, and potentially sheep meats and pork. Joe Ludwig last night mentioned and celebrated the 2012 Malaysia-Australia FTA, and he actually also asked you to join in him the warmth and the vigour of that being fully implemented by 2026. And he backed that up by asking you, well, that will mean something to the young people in the room. He obviously hasn't got the same vision that I've got standing up here this morning. And for a bloke like me, 2026 hopefully should mean about 15 years of bloody fishing. Yeah. But free trade, why don't they happen easily, or why don't they happen quickly? And I suppose I've got an overarching concern that what business would sensibly ask a public servant to be in charge of commercial negotiations for their business? No disrespect to the public servants here today, Greg Robbins, not having a crack much, but the reality is that the public servants have chosen a different path for their careers. None of it was in trade negotiation. None of it was in trade leadership, and none of it actually is providing jobs back through that growth or that business. So we get what we pay for or what we ask to represent us. So let's have a look quickly down how things fast go. Australia-China, 17 rounds of meetings in the last 7 years, and would not be 30% of the way there. The Gulf cooperation, 4 rounds, got excited and suspended. Not sure what the term of the suspension was, whether somebody got a black flag or a yellow card, or whether it was by mutual consent because they were going nowhere. India, 3 rounds, it's only new, we've only been going a year, but they've met 3 times, so that's important. Australia, Japan. The really one I like actually is the Pacific Agreement on Closer Economic Relations, PACER. Now that's an agreement where Australia is giving everything, and the other parties haven't agreed to that yet. So that's, some could say that's quite bizarre. I actually think it's unbelievable. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, Joe spoke about that last night. It's being really, really important to us, and a whole new footing for Australia. 14 rounds in 4 years and still hasn't got any traction yet. So we laugh about it, but our whole business and our whole trade network is based on these free trade agreements. And they would all be signed on a same-day basis until you put agriculture into the basket. And that's generally the stopping point for all. Ludwig thinks the meat industry did the cattle industry a disservice in the Australia-Korea free trade agreement, because we were within probably 1 round of meetings of getting that signed off 12, 15 months ago. However, they wanted us to accept a deal worse than the USA got. USA got free in 15 years, Australia should be happy with 18 years. From a processing point of view, that could have been a pathway, but why? Why were we to be a second-class citizen? We stood side by side with the Yanks in 1955 and fought on their behalf, but they want us to have a second-best deal. And now meat industry is actually being lambasted by the cattle industry and a minister because you blokes closed the door on it yourselves. You should have accepted. I just want to know and understand the basis of why we should have taken a second-place agreement. What was the different point? different point with us. The next one, so once we get the free trade agreement, if you don't want a free trade agreement but you had one imposed on you, then you can come up with a raft of technical issues to stop market access. So the doors are open, can't really be challenged under a WTO agreement. So this list here, it's over a month old, so it's probably doubled. Or these are added to each of the countries. But all of our major target countries there have an impediment under technical access. And we have a whole raft of organisations in this country that are thinking they're dealing with the technical access issues or the market access issues. And we as cattle levy payers are paying an enormous amount of money for technical market access issues to get resolved. And they're just building and building. And I'm not sure actually they're not building, because if we look back 10, 15 years ago, you almost had two listings as a meat processor. You had USDA and you had other. And the majority of the countries around the world would accept the USDA listing as almost, if it's good enough for there, just bring it in, bring it in. But now these countries are wanting to individualise themselves and have some relevance and get an AQUIS fully paid visit to Australia. It's become a little bit of a service reward, I think, for inspectors. But they all want an identity. And I guess with the amount of food scares and issues we've had in the States, maybe it's not the best model anymore to declare that you want to tie your country's import protocols to that of the US. Sorry. So, right, here's one for you, Mick. Carbon tax. ACC's a little bit lucky because our impact at the moment is because we're very slow moving. We still have open aeration ponds and haven't been captured in the 25,000 tonne limit for CO2 offtake. So we just got body slammed with an electricity charge. And for us, 32% increase on peak rate electricity, 86% increase on off-peak rate. $10,256 a week straight off the bottom line, and no other way for relief in the short term. Medium term's good. If I invest $1, the bloke that just hit me up with a tax is going to give me $1 to try and ameliorate the expense. Mrs. Jones down the street got a full $900 to offset her electricity, but I guess Mrs. Jones votes, ACC doesn't. So we've been caught up in the whole thing: road haulage, cold storage charges, and our general business inputs. And we're working, even though ACC has a strong domestic focus, we have a large export focus. So we're lining up internationally against competitors who do not have that cost impediment on their business. And we're meant to be fair. And I'll say the whole thing at the moment is it generally falls down to the bottom, which goes back to prime production. It's the only way where the costs can come out of the business. Not saying that's right, but that's where it happens. Moving on, because meat processing is going to be covered eloquently by Mr. Berry over here. Just touch on the only thing that's saving us in farm, apart from this bloke here in the white shirt, because he stood in our factory about a month ago and said, I will repeal the tax. And I didn't quite believe him, so I actually assembled my senior management staff. We had a cup of tea and asked him to say it again, so that way we could get it on film and on tape. And he's adamant that he will repeal the tax. So maybe that's going to be a saviour, which means we shouldn't rush off and invest everything yet for a future that hopefully may have been changed within the next 5 months. Moving away from the factory back out to the farm, we have a blanket statement there that agriculture won't be caught up yet. Now, this is from a person who said there'll be no carbon tax. So you have to make your own judgments about what the impact on agriculture will be and what it won't be. And there's a whole lot of people there listed far better informed than I am making comments. But the bloke, this organisation actually wrote almost, dare I say it, the Bible on the carbon tax, being the AFI. It's provided the whole basis for the MLA's role, which is one of the other reasons why I didn't want to discuss it, because Mick's team's done all the work. It's about 54 pages long, including graphs and everything. So if you really want the answer on the impact on agriculture, the carbon tax, read the book when you go home. So let's go back to the topic, the headline challenges as I see it for a Queensland landholder or a Queensland agriculturist. Competition from resource companies. We actually still haven't got that. We haven't got that quite sorted out yet, as to what that means. Open access. We've got a government that's trying to catch up legislation, particularly in the coal seam gas area, and I suspect my views on that are quite well known. But there is competition there, and it's still unbalanced and unbiased. And whilst we have strategic cropping lands, we actually haven't got strategic grassland. Now, I choose to grow grass because I'm in the beef business. If I choose to grow wheat, then I'll be able to call it strategic cropping land. So we've got all those influences coming through the land, and I've got the wind-up clause. Livestock. This is the next one, and obviously we have a lady in the room today who is part of that process. But we've got to understand the industry we're in, and that we are not actually reflective of the people who look at the processes and practices we engage in our businesses. Industry leadership, industry structure, it's a whole mishmash. There is no clear way to the top, and there's no clear way yet to represent our industry, and that's unfortunately probably being worked on by far too many people who all have the pathway at the moment. People, attraction, retention. How do we get people out in the bush? What's the secret? Well, we're as guilty as anybody, I imagine, because I am. I haven't trained any of my children to have a role in agriculture. I got as excited and as proud as punch because my daughter's a doctor. I haven't sent her out in the bush, I just hoped she would. So we can't say it's somebody else's job to put their kids out in the bush working on our lands. We've actually got to start to work out why our kids aren't there, or why we're not training our kids to be out there. What a great headline. How often we've been seeing that, right? Farm workforce withers, young people leave, drift to the city. Yeah, bit mundane. What about when you read it in the China Daily newspaper? 1.3 billion people, and their kids are leaving the bush to go to the city and work. So they just have a bigger problem we have. So it's not just about us. Environment, I know this has been covered by yesterday's and the previous forum held by AFI, but it's very relevant to how we are and how we are able to work. Access to our water to be more productive. David Farley reminded me the Queensland Government's mantra of one of its 4 pillars is to double agricultural production in the next 8 years. Well, we actually need access to land and water to do it. It's not just about doubling yields on the same given area. The Green movement, the Green vote, it is still very strong. It holds a balance of power in 3 out of 7 governments. So we have to work out how to access their passion. And then the finally one, the one I have no answers for, the cost price squeeze, but there's bankers in the room today that may be able to chat about that. The Aussie dollar is predicated on the fact of the big holes we dig in the ground, but also on the weakness of our countries around us, particularly the US. The re-election of Obama added about a solid $1.50 to the dollar, and will probably take at least 3 months to erode that through our own actions. Government inefficiencies, duplication, we all suffer it daily, we look at it daily. But equally importantly, since the re-election in 2007, restrictive industrial work practices are back with us, they're real, they're live. You're obviously reading that the productivity on the ports now is heading back to its lowest level since the 80s. So work choices was far too aggressive, far too unsaleable, far too unvotable, but we've gone from the extreme to the extreme. We're going to have to find middle ground, or we will continue to remain either uncompetitive or not in business. But you can't just have all the problems unless you sit down and spend some time thinking about the challenges, about the solutions. So we can't rely on government to come up with a solution. We've got to come up with the solutions and go to government and say, we need your support to either enact it, codify it, or regulate it. But if we think that some bloke who won a popularity poll every 3 or 4 years, who's come through either the business policy network or the union branch network, is going to be the saviour of your particular sector in the industry, then you actually get what you deserve. So, what should we do? Joe started last night. We all congratulated Joe on being a supporter of agriculture. So be careful what you're supporting. But we've got to talk it up. I mean, all you ever hear about, we've got the live export issue, or it's drought, or it's bushfire. We've got bloody charity causes for our sector. Let's get over the charity cause and start to look after ourselves. Let's be up front. Let's not continually looking for handouts or support, because then we're just back in the basket case of the unmarried mother with 7 kids on a pension. Unite and engage the angries. So if we have a common voice, and by angries I just mean anybody that doesn't agree with me, but we talked about all those other forces before, be it the environment group, be it the animal group, be it the whatever group. But we need to have a common voice in there. And I think Joe even said that last night. United voice, he's buggered. If you come at him in a one-prong attack, he can't dodge you. At the moment, what he would say was, if I want to delay a decision by 9 months, I'll form an advisory council. And it's true, and that's what they do. And we all feel good about getting on the advisory council, then you work out it actually is going nowhere, but you felt good about it because you felt important. But that's a government tactic to do that. It's really effective. Livestock, again, unite and engage the Angries. We are not representative, very representative of the 22 million people that live in this country, the people that shop daily, be it in their markets, their local butchers or whatever. We are not good judges of their mentalities or their mindsets or their thought processes. So we've got to respond to them. We're not going to convert them. We're not going to change them. So we've got to start to work out how we manipulate their thought process, become positive to our business. People, promote our industry. Promote it as it's sexy. There's as much technology and innovation in the bush as there ever is in my processing factory. Certainly possibly more than the bank. The bank just has a smarter way of handling your money. Great technology. But we've got to convince kids that actually there is science and technology and agriculture that actually is leading the rest of industries. Environment, cost price squeeze. All there, that's some of the things that we look to work on as an industry if we come up with the common theme, which is to be a united voice and a proactive voice. Thank you.